Welcome, everyone, to a brand new experiment. This is the Crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum Private Decentralized Infrastructure Show with Sterlin and Chair. I am Chair, and that right there is Sterlin. Sterlin, hello.
Am I live? Am I good? Hello, my
You're
friends.
live. You are good. We are here. We are live all over the place, from your Facebook and my YouTube and Twitter to your Twitter and back, in vertical and horizontal formats, no less. We are live. How are you today, Sterlin?
Man, brother, I am doing quite well. We just had our Logos Circles X Space, and now we're going to get a bit, I feel like we're going to get a bit more broad, cover some more domains within crypto, but in a couple of different areas as well. But man, I'm doing fantastic. Feeling good. Yourself?
Feeling good. We're hot off of a logo circle space, which happen every Tuesday, hosted by you, and I'm always there to prop you up. And it's got me thinking Logos node running and what's ahead for the Logos tech stack and those who want to participate in it. And it's a lot. There's a lot going on. It's a lot of fun. I have in the corner of my eye all of the charts, and they're all red. Happy everything's down 10% again day, everyone. But we go boldly forward. Since we're live on each other's channels, Sterlin, I thought it might be a good idea for us to introduce each other to each other's audiences. For those who might not be familiar, would you like to go first? Maybe tell the Chairs Table crew about yourself and how you got into these fun crypto doings.
Absolutely happy to share at least a part of the story. So you hear people's cryptocurrency, blockchain origin stories, and if you ask a lot of people right now how they got into the space, a good chunk of folks will say they came from traditional finance, right? That's a pretty common story. They came from traditional finance or some kind of traditional institutional background, or maybe they even got into it because they were engaged in some kind of high frequency trading, right? Or they were a quant, something of that nature. I actually came into the space from a position that I think was the original intention and use case for cryptocurrency, and this is the cypherpunk and the crypto anarchist side of things. So back in 2009, I was browsing, and maybe 2010, browsing, surfing online, and looking at ways to engage in different kinds of activism against the state. I had recently become a hardcore crypto anarchist voluntarist, and I was looking online and engaging in these forums, and I came into contact with people calling themselves cypherpunks. And I read Timothy May's Crypto Anarchist Manifesto, and then in the comment section on this particular forum, people were talking about Bitcoin being the first iteration of this crypto anarchic financial technology. So that was my first real exposure. Actually, this was at this time, it was in 2012 or 13, actually, because I remember I made my first post about Bitcoin was in 2013. Of course, the white paper and the protocol at 2009, right, had been released. So that I came into this as an activist, wanting to actually push back against the state apparatus, wanting to try to create actual transformation and change in the world. And I have been in the space ever since. I didn't get into the space professionally, though, and start working actually at cryptocurrency companies and organizations until 2015, where I worked with Roger Ver at Bitcoin.com for several years. Then after that, I worked with an exchange called CryptoSpace for several years, and then the last couple of years I've been working with Logos. Of course, Logos is crypto, but also works sort of adjacently in the parallel society ecosystem, which I hope comes up. That topic, I'm sure, will come up a lot in our conversations.
It almost certainly will. And Logo, what an interesting fit is, like, talk about activism and crypto together, which are more related to each other than people take for granted or realize at this point, like especially those traditional finance folks that you mentioned. I realize now that I should have turned on a light. Maybe I'll do it. Here, I'll do it. I'm going to do it. Watch how fast I can do it. Ah. And look at that.
Nice.
See how much marginally better that is? Yeah, it's really, it is something we'll get into. It's not anything that ever left my mind, but like activism, crypto or Bitcoin certainly is like a form of activism. Who, regardless of whomever and however it might have been co-opted after its inception or following its inception. And we can get into those emails later. I mean, my awareness of crypto came very, very early, or of Bitcoin rather, when it was trading like just above $1. So whenever that was, I think it was 2011. And I was tracking it a little bit, and it went, it rose up to something like $3 before crashing back down to 1. And I thought that I was a genius for not getting involved and not loading up, and then watched it as it started. As I was following the self-taught web developer path starting around 2015, as I was trying to learn to code and go more deep into my own knowledge of software. It coincided with the beginning of the rise of Bitcoin price from 100 to 1,000. And I had recalled those early forums and those posts that I had seen encouraging people to load up while it was still $1 and really going like, and watching it to ascend to 1,000. But it was at that time, like right around 2015 and then 2016, as those things were happening and I was learning to code, that I attended an unsanctioned rave deep in the Joshua Tree Desert. And it was there on the dance floor of that rave that I met someone who at the time was contributing to Ethereum protocols. And I was already aware of Ethereum at the time. And so we started talking about Bitcoin a little bit. And he told me, if you think Bitcoin is cool, you should check out Ethereum, because the potential that lies within Ethereum, the vision that Ethereum has, the roadmap that it has, and this was in 2016 when the roadmap was a little bit closer to the 2014 white paper version. Yeah, he described the world computer, world database nature of it, and the ability to execute arbitrary code as long as it compiles via smart contract, and the possibilities of that, what those are and what those are, what those were, what those still are, is the ability for humanity to coordinate. Otherwise unaligned people with diverging incentives can otherwise coordinate in an economic and governance way. But really, it's like the possibility for a less corrupt system to actually exist, built on top of the cryptographic foundation, like truth that is cryptography, was absolutely mind blowing. And that is that was the fuel that I needed. That like basically all of my attention went towards Ethereum, the wider crypto community, and then COVID hit. I started working as a developer between then and COVID. And as COVID hit, I started participating more in weird Telegram groups and watching projects get launched from nothing on day one to a smart contract live with the front end and hundreds of users on day two, and realizing that things could move more quickly in this environment that they do in the traditional corporate, the tech scenario. So like around 2021, I just started freelancing completely in crypto, and left the cushy corporate job with the benefits and the security, to the amazement of my superiors and mentors, or most of my mentors, except for the ones that were in crypto that were begging me uh, to come over this in the same way that I encourage people to come over still, and contribute towards these things if it's something you're interested in. But that sort of was my window into it. And I think you and I, Sterlin, met for the first time in Denver in 2024 was the first time we met in person, though we had interacted I think before then. So that's yeah, that's how our paths crossed in this wild and wonderful world. Um, Anyway, let us know if you're watching there in the chat. Wherever you are watching, if there's a chat that you can use, we can see it, and we will field your questions if they are deemed appropriate.
Yeah, and we are intending to do this stream at the same time, right? I think, Chair, that's the plan on Tuesdays.
Yes. At this time now, here, wherever you are, right here, is where you can find the Crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum private decentralized infrastructure show with yours truly.
And one of the things though, when you were speaking just now, that struck in my mind. So you really also got into the space of from a more philosophical perspective, even though there was a maybe a slight, at least you were working slightly close to the monetary or the financial sort of realm,
Kind of
loosely.
like it was a healthcare coordinator, still is a healthcare
Mm.
coordination app, and it was like a Ruby on Rails app with a bunch of AWS services was essentially the product. So working within that stack, which was like really far away from smart contracts, Ethereum, Solidity, C++, like really none of those things. So I saw as like as much as plugged in, whatever that means, as I was in like 2016, 17, as I started working more in that corporate world. It started like I wasn't really focusing on the tech side of things, Solidity, what's happening, what are these front ends doing for Web3 dApps until COVID. And then lots of time to do tutorials and learn about things and network and meet new people. So that was when my attention was refocused. But my attention was always like I was always keeping a thumb on thing or an eye on things because of that philosophical. Like the promise was, it wasn't. I was watching the price. Everyone was watching the price, and it's certainly amazing when you see something cost $1. It costs a lot more later. No matter what it is, you're gonna stay. It's gonna stay close to the surface of your memory. Um, but it was the reason I was deeply interested then and continue to be is the philosophical foundation that this is built on, the potential that that still lies within that egg that is the foundation.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that too, because I feel like this is something we're going to return to again and again, right? Because uh, I see a lot of people, and we can go down this rabbit hole if you want to. I'm game to explore any threads of thought, but I do feel like a lot of people, they get into this space and their whole proclivity, like their modus operandi, they're thinking win number go up. They want so they primarily want to make as much money as they possibly can. They see this as an investment. Sometimes they see it as just a tradable asset. But the irony, of course, is that because of people have this mindset, they come into the space and they get wiped out, right? Because they're just trying to play this game. They're not actually thinking about the original intention, use case, and underlying principle set that props up the ecosystem. And just it's my personal thought that that is the reason, right? That's the reason why one is a lot of people get hurt in the ecosystem, but number two is it has also, and this is something I'm pretty passionate about, represents a kind of a hijacking of the space, right? And I think personally this is what happened to Bitcoin in a lot of ways. The original intention and use case was as peer-to-peer electronic cash, and that's part of the political expose, if you will, of Bitcoin originally. It's meant to disintermediate third parties. This is literally written in the white paper. But of course, all of that has been through character assassination, smear campaign, propaganda, all of the above. Peer-to-peer cash has transformed in Bitcoin to this idea of digital gold, right? And I know a lot of people talk about this. We're definitely not the first ones to discuss this, but I think that the consequences of it are just being fully felt, and the ramifications and repercussions of it are just being fully felt, right? And we can go down that path if you want. But I do think it's something really important, really critical to discuss.
It almost certainly has been hijacked. No matter what your definition of that word specifically is, there's evidence that has come out very recently, and I want to be. I don't want to be careful, but I will about like where that evidence comes from. But if you could think about a recent cache of electronic mail that was released to the public, um, that contains direct evidence of the interest and involvement of those parties and how they sought to influence. In fact, there's so much there that there's that even with all the people looking into it, not everything has emerged yet, even if it wasn't blacked out. Okay, I hope I'm not being too vague there. But even without that evidence, though it was suspected, I heard that story for years. I just didn't want to believe it. I just did like with so many horrifying things that a human can hear and block out because it's more convenient to block out and not think about. The suggestion that such a co-opting had taken place was not new to me at all, and I had heard even before COVID. So for that to be revealed, it's disappointing. But the evidence of like the block size war example, in retrospect, was a result of said co-opting. And there's other things like narratives, and it's really like it's the repeated thing that happens with anything that has such a big potential to change the status quo. Powers seek to co-opt them, the narrative and the thing itself, as quickly as possible, divide both sides, controlling both sides and controlling the narrative and dialectic coming from both sides, and only allowing those who align with their motives to emerge as leaders or to have any real sort of voice. And of course, it's been shown what happens when previously chosen ones fall out of alignment. Then all of a sudden, JFK, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, so on and so forth. So, with all that being said, the story of co-opting, like of course it's co-opted, but the beautiful thing about everything is co-opted. You're only allowed to go viral if you're allowed to go viral. Somebody smarter than me said that, like, the only things that go viral, if something goes viral, it's because it was allowed to go viral. And you can look to the censorship on the so-called freedom of speech platform X. There's so many accounts that Grok won't talk about if you ask about them. Logos being one of them for a long time. I think he's gotten better about that. But there was a time recently where you could say, at Grok, tell me about this account. And it's just silence. Okay, at Grok, tell me about this corporate soda. Paragraphs. Interesting. So there's that level of censorship, and like the amount of and then the individual accounts that are censored from like their voices, and the literal reach is cut off. But cryptography is still not illegal. And cryptography is truth. Math is truth. And of course, like the way we perceive reality, and we're all taught certain primitives, so we all see things a certain way. And maybe if we broke out of those primitives, pi would equal a perfect 3 and we could fly and the whole thing. I get that. I understand that. But what I'm saying is right now, math is truth. We all use the same math. And cryptography is truth, because cryptography protects information in a mathematically sound way. And whatever, quantum is quantum, and that's being talked about more and more these days. And I guess that's a bridge that will be crossed. But for now, at the very least, cryptography can be trusted. And ZK, zero knowledge technology built on top of that cryptography, provides the potentials for amazing, amazing things, going back to less corruptible systems. And what a threat less corruptible systems are to the systems that exist now. Now trying to tie it back to the philosophical angle. So that's why I'm still fired up about all of this. Like, nothing yet has really been achieved. the primitives for, like, even with the existence of Bitcoin and Ethereum and Monero and others, and it's fucking amazing and great that they do exist. But really, like, very, very little has been achieved yet in terms of moving human systems forward. We're getting very close, though, I think, or the technology is getting very close. How off base am I, Sterlin?
You nailed it, my friend. And I really like how you took the conversation in a direction that's positive. It definitely can be a bit of a black pill to go down this path of talking about the hijacking of crypto, because it does, as even as I was articulating it, it's like, oh well, what do we do then? What's the solution? And what you made me think of when you were speaking, Chair, is the idea that uh, nothing has fundamentally changed about the power of cryptography, right? And that we can still build technology stacks, and deploy applications that do uphold value and principle, right? And that also have communities around those technologies that still care about the values and principles. Right, and this is actually one of the fundamental weaknesses of hijacking, right? And we can get into the terminology here, but when you come in and you try to hijack a cryptocurrency, all of that happens at the edges on the social layer or the human layer of the technology, right? A good chunk of it, because you have to social engineer certain people to think a certain
Until it
way.
gets deeper into the inside. Wink, wink, Ethereum Foundation, but we'll get into it.
Oh yeah, that's not even another animal or beast compared to the Bitcoin story, but there are definitely some similarities there. But I think at the end of the day, if we're looking at this as optimistically as possible, we still have the capacity, and this is the point, to develop, and we actually have tools right now that allow us to maintain our privacy and our anonymity, and that also allow us to maintain censorship resistant. But this is something that I think still requires a tremendous amount of like education, and people actually have to work to get to this side of the space. So this is one of the critical insights I think of this discussion that can come out, is that we definitely need more education too around how to properly use the technology, about who's building what, like who can I trust that's building tools and technology that actually fits my philosophical aspirations or my philosophical background. And also and also you have to be able to do due diligence, right, and understand at least enough of the technicals to say, hey, this is actually a cryptocurrency or a project or protocol that is legit and that is very hard to undermine to that. And that's part of it, very hard to social engineer, undermine. And just as give you an example of this, so we're not, or I'm not at least completely in abstraction land, is I'm a huge fan of the Monero community, right? I think the Monero community is very dedicated to principle and to cause, and it's also extremely difficult, if not impossible, to completely undermine the privacy of Monero, and that kind of love that community, generally speaking.
And they stood the test of time, that community and that technology, and has been censored and deplatformed. To talk about the token itself from centralized exchanges, and it is proven to be resilient. Um, and I know I think someone has already built or is building like a Monero atomic swap module for Logos, so that you can use Monero via Logos, and like Logos Basecamp, for instance, or just via Logos, to get the best of both worlds of privacy. So if people want to conduct their payments and business in Monero, but otherwise leverage the Logos private, decentralized, peer-to-peer technology stack, they can do so in a native application that runs directly on their machine and not via a browser, which is the number one way all of the messed up stuff happens. Not the only way. Sometimes people click on executables and whatnot, but largely it's that JavaScript coming from your browser that we're all running right now that that starts all the trouble, and Logos avoids it completely. So I'm very interested in the other potential marriages that could happen with other networks and communities, because Logos is built to support them all. So running Ethereum and Bitcoin based applications via Logos natively is also possible. That's an exciting thing. I guess it's a good time to divulge to those who don't know that you and I both contribute to Logos in various ways, um, because we believe in it. Or I'll speak for myself. Because I believe in it. I don't. There couldn't possibly be. Or I mean, I guess it's possible, but it's hard to find a project that I'm more aligned with than Logos. So to be able to contribute day to day is quite a pleasure. By the way, if you're in the Los Angeles area, today is Logo Circle Los Angeles Day. So if you are interested in learning more, logos.co/circles, you'll find the Los Angeles event that's coming up, and I'll see you tonight. Where is that? Where is that, LA? There we are. Anyway, y'all have fun. There we go. This is the winnable issue. Anyway, the links are there.
Yeah, I was gonna.
The links are there. There it is. Boom.
I was gonna add something to your mention too of Logos. So even outside the scope of thinking about the Logos technology stack, which is amazing, as a chair hinted at, even thinking outside of that, the community itself, thinking about the movement that surrounds Logos and the principles. This goes back into our earlier discussion about hijacking, like hijacking some of these protocols and technologies and the communities that surround them, is partly because I believe the cultures in those communities ended up getting warped at some point and ended up falling off course as a result of that. And some of that has to do, specifically in the Bitcoin example, the censorship that the early censorship that occurred in the Bitcoin community, I think, was one of the contributing factors that allowed for the propagandizing of that whole community, right? On our Bitcoin, on bitcointalk.org, all of those places were effectively the realm of conversation. The conversational topics were extremely narrowed down a particular path. And one of the things that the culture, so you have to have a cultural attitude that prevents that kind of stuff from happening. And that means being open to feedback, being open to critique, being willing to work together in the context of friction and differences. And this is something that I strongly believe the culture at Logos pushes as hard as possible, and that the people involved in the community really take an ethic toward like hard work and trying to solve problems and communicating as a part of this. And to me, this is a way to make yourself hijacking proof. This is not to say that you can't, like, actors can't come in and try to hijack, but I think, and this is important, I think the onus is on all of us who work in these different kind of communities that are trying to build for transformational purposes, for trying to create a new world, for trying to actually engineer privacy tooling and anonymity tooling. You have to also be able to build your culture in a way that really defends those values. Because even if someone comes in talking shit and trying to shit on Logos, those people aren't going to get censored. Instead, there's going to be an open discussion. Of course, this doesn't mean like you can just come in and just like arbitrarily attack individual people, right? There's like some boundary issues, of course, but this is a different from like political censorship, where you're censoring people because they view your technology in a certain lens, or they want the direction of the technology to change. So this is a really important topic, I think, to discuss, because at on a fundamental level, hijacking is about a culture not really being cohered in such a way that prevents that from happening to begin with, right? And this is something I don't think is talked about a lot in the context of Bitcoin, but that culture was made very susceptible to hijacking because there wasn't a very the culture at the time wasn't very strong in terms of the actual philosophy. I think there were actors who definitely were, and organizations that were strong, but seems like there was a kind of ideological drift, and it seems like it might have happened. And this comes from personal experience working at Bitcoin.com and being a major part of the space as the scaling debates started to take over that community, and you could see like the factionalism really do damage to the cultural infrastructure of that whole ecosystem. So having cultures like Logos, like Monero, I think this is something, an idea that we can weave together throughout this whole conversation. It's really important to make sure you have a human focus and not just the tech focus. And
It's just as important. Like it has to be equal. Else it can, or I'm thinking of the scale of justice, but that might not be the right of it. But like, if one outweighs the other, it doesn't work. I think the evidence of that is what has happened with Bitcoin, what I and others argue has happened with Ethereum. Actually, to argue, like it's the proof of the evidence is there, in a number of things, the protocols they support versus stop supporting, etc. Um, say like culturally, I have seen a shift in the last decade, and it's wild to say out loud that it's been 16, yeah, probably 15 years since I have at least been aware of the rhetoric, the movement that is Bitcoin and crypto and as it's evolved. So over that 15-year shift, as I really was earnestly paying attention to trying to learn as much as I could in 2016, the dialogue was always centered around self-custody, privacy, protecting yourself, understanding that the ledger is a public ledger and everyone knows everything that's going on in it. This was the narrative every day on the forums, in articles and blogs that were being published, and videos that people were making. Those were, you know, the things that you heard repeated in people's own flavor ad nauseum, because they were important. There's a reason that those things bubbled up to the surface, because self-custody is a core tenet of crypto, and being in possession of your own assets and belongings in a cryptographically secure way, in an operationally secure way, is the first thing that you need to learn about, even though it's one of the more confusing things. There's way easier things, but it's the first thing that you need to learn about. It's a hard boot camp. But then there's easier, blocks and transactions being bundled in them and then being chained and then referring to the last block by a hash. That's all easy compared to like, okay, so a wallet, the concept of a wallet is, okay, it's an address, it has things. And why can't people access it? Okay, because it's really hard to guess the private key. Okay. So like people have to wrap their mind, it might take years. I think it took me years to like just wrap my mind around that concept.
yeah, we could talk about. I have some ideas about why that's the case, but you first, I want to speak to the principle that you mentioned. Not your keys, not your crypto has been a rallying cry for in different quadrants of our whole, quote unquote, broader crypto community for the longest time. But it's not. It's a bit of a paradox, I guess, or an irony, because you point that out and it's 100% true. But we've also both pointed out that there has been various kinds of hijacking in the space and various kinds of propaganda that have actively moved people away from the not your keys, not your crypto mindset. There's been some amount of campaigneering, if you will, to get people to centralize their assets, right? To centralize it on a platform, et cetera. And some of this, so I'm going to get a little bit maybe philosophically dense. So remember where, and I mean dense in the heavy matter base. Don't worry, it's not gonna be that dense. Okay.
We support all directions.
Yeah. So remember Andreas Antonopoulos, right? He was a huge commentator in crypto for the longest time, and I think he still speaks sometimes, maybe. But he gave a talk at one point, and he pointed out there's this there's this phenomenon both in design and in philosophy that seems to take precedence when we develop new kinds of technologies. He called it, or what it's called, and he's the one who I learned the term from, skeuomorphic design. So in a skeuomorphic design principle is one where you create some new technology, right? But you implement old design styles or design features from older legacy technologies into the new technology, right? And so, like, given an example of this is when you create an iPhone, having like a little trash can bin icon as a trash can, or on a desktop is a reference to an actual wastebasket, right? And in this sense, that could be thought of as skeuomorphic design idea. But one of the worst ways that this principle has come to pass is that most people, design wise, are used to centralized platforms. They're used to centralization. They're used to the ease of access that comes with centralization, right? So having your funds stored in a bank where you don't have access to that, it's really the bank's money. That is a design principle if you think about it in design terms, right? So
The bank will
whenever
give you a note that represents your money.
Indeed. So it's no surprise then that a lot of cryptocurrency wallet design, right? And even design around, like, thinking about cryptocurrency in general, has started to take on the form of skeuomorphism, where it makes sense to people to have their funds stored on some kind of crypto exchange because it just feels like the old banking apparatus. So this is both like a design, like it's a psychological issue in design space. So it takes a bit of work to get people out of that mindset to really embrace a not your keys, not your crypto. And as you mentioned earlier, Chair, there is some amount of education and some amount of principle both kind of combined that come into that. This is why I also think, and this is another topic, we should continue, if we work in the privacy space or in the actual space where people care about cypherpunkism and crypto anarchist values, making things as easy to use as possible, and also having an educational component where people understand what the benefits are. And of course, whenever we use any kind of technology, there's always trade-offs, but acknowledging that there are trade-offs and then learning to work with those trade-offs is really important, especially if we want to actually protect ourselves and our money. And we've seen the horror stories. There's no need to recount them here, but people have lost, what is it, probably in the billions of dollars now on exchange losses over time, right?
FTX alone, no?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's so like I have a note here from earlier that says old playbooks, new arena. I think the manner in which, yeah, it does look like, it's an element of the crypto environment is very much financial and economic. And like going back to the Byzantine fault tolerant or Byzantine general proofs or problem and proofs. What's the Byzantine general? What's the official name for it?
Yeah, the Byzantine generals problem.
The problem? Yeah. So perhaps we'll get into it. Basically, it's like, okay, you have three armies. None of them like each other, but all three know that they want to attack a city. They have the city surrounded. How do the armies prove uh, what numbers they have and that they are capable of carrying out an attack? The answer is proof of work, because otherwise the armies would have to mutilate, or otherwise, not mutilate. Well, yeah, like it's like, oh, if the general just cuts off one ear from each of his soldiers and sends it to the other armies, that's proof that he has that many soldiers, so on and so forth. Is the way to reduce down um, explanation. Basically, the point is proof of work. So
Yeah, I
with
think.
okay.
Sorry. Yeah,
No,
sorry.
please, please,
Sorry.
please.
Sorry to interject. I was gonna. So, effectively, Byzantine generals' problem too is when it's a coordination problem, right? Because if they all want to attack the castle or the city, at one time, but maybe one of the generals is a traitor and will defect. This is also an issue that has to be taken into account uh, by the Byzantine generals problem. And this is ultimately, by the way, this is the problem with the way that uh, Bitcoin, like Satoshi developed the Nakamoto consensus, was a way to solve this problem, to get nodes, right, to be able to work together and to be able to check each other's work sort of simultaneously. This and what this ultimately to prevented, if we're getting into the technicals, as well as the double spend problem, which was one of the huge problems with eCash, generally speaking, in the cryptocurrency world, because you want to have a system that tracks proper accounting in the ledger, so that people can't double spend coins as well. I think this works together with solving the larger coordination problem in the context of the Byzantine. Yeah, I just wanted to throw
And within that comes an economic coordination, like with the solving of the Byzantine generals problem, and with Byzantine fault tolerance, gives the ability to people to coordinate in a financial and economic way that with the we got halfway with the that was halfway possible with the internet, but still relied on the centralized authorities, and now all of a sudden it doesn't. But it looks so similar to, and it is so similar to things that people have already been experts in for generations and millennia, even money and value. That it's an easy crossover, and it makes a lot of sense, like in markets and advanced markets and simple markets and all of that. But the real kicker, or the one that I understand more about than I do the financial and mathematical side of things, is the coordination, communication, and organizing, and participating in a community sort of way. And what happens time and time again that I have witnessed is social engineering attacks of various levels and scale, like in degrees of intensity and scale. Long term, like long form, or long tail and short lived sort of social engineering scenarios and schemes that, if you look at evidence now from the aforementioned email dump that came out recently, and when those efforts started on behalf of those parties, which it seems to be around 2013, leading 4 years later into the block size wars, and who those parties were effectively influencing, which I believe like 5 of the 7 core devs or 3 of the 5 core devs that were participating out of the MIT labs were directly influenced, let's say, and propped up by said party. So it's like a majority of the most influential figures in the Bitcoin space. Well, that is a social engineering attack. It's a simple one, but it's a long tail one. You create a financial reliance, if not otherwise, and you create all the support and everything else probably that they lavished upon their beloved puppets. But that, and so the evidence of that goes right into the big block size wars and the divergence of like Satoshi's vision, which I'm not referring to. That whole thing that was later, but the split between big blockers and small blockers, the divisiveness of it, who was singled out as an enemy, Roger Ver taking the blunt of or the major well, the blunt force trauma that they hurled at him, but like taking the majority of the attacks. And like, why? Well, everyone has their everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but like Roger had a sane, some say, uh, sort of sober vision and a real vision for what Bitcoin could and should be, what the original vision was. And so he was discredited. And I am guilty of, like, my initial interpretation of it was Roger Ver was the bad guy, and that Bitcoin Cash was nefarious and a nuisance, and like basically like I swallowed whole the narrative that I was supposed to swallow, like that was designed for me to swallow whole, because Reddit was completely fucking co-opted, if not like the commenters. the things that were getting upvoted at the time. And, shame on me for like using Reddit as a primary source of information. I've ceased to do so since then. And I encourage people to find independent sources of information and do more reading, but that's a whole other thing. As I'm sure Sterlin would encourage you as well, as you see the cache of books that he has behind him. So yeah, I fell for it. And so with enough time, I can see both the machine that was at work and, with enough time, all is revealed. And we are entering the age of Aquarius, are we not? When all is revealed and fish dominate the realm, I guess, water. Actually, I think, isn't Aquarius? No, Aquarius is definitely a water sign. It's Aquarius. So there's that, and there's others, and there are others. I think, for the sake of time, I'll save it. And actually, it's a really good teaser. We can get into what specifically is going on and has happened with the Ethereum Foundation, early influences on Ethereum that are not dissimilar to early foundations of Bitcoin. Evidence would suggest. And then on a more micro level, taking away like foundational level and core dev level stuff, project by project, you see these social engineering attacks. So it has nothing to do with the finances or the technology or the security that this tech is built on and provides if people use it the right way, but it becomes a lot easier to scam people and social engineer them if you take away the not your keys, not your crypto narrative. If you take away this is why self-custody is important. This is why OPSEC is important. This is why not trusting every fucking profile that has a blue check mark and a bunch of followers and spicy and tasty words to sell, and well-formatted posts and seemingly a really plugged in community behind them with lots of support. And if you start acting like them, they start supporting you too. And wow, we're part of this great big thing. Look at us. We're going to change the world with these pictures of dogs. Where 5% is going to the kennel. So on and so forth. Yeah, it's something actually like as the crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, private decentralized infrastructure show with Sterlin and Cherry Evolves, I think we should go deeper into some of these social engineering attacks and narrative hijackings and cultural sort of influences that have gone into how things have matured over the last 15 years or so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I figure there's going to be a lot of history lessons that we surface in the pursuit of conducting this show and doing the show. I think I want to make, before we start getting to the wrap here, I want to speak to Roger in that early sort of situation again. So one of the tragedies of this is the human component, right? Because Roger got defamed and castigated and harangued for simply championing the idea that Bitcoin is and should remain peer-to-peer electronic cash. I think he was one of the earliest to see the writing on the wall that if the narrative around Bitcoin can be shifted, then the actual whole ecosystem can be like redirected as a tool of sovereignty and personal financial responsibility to one of institutional control, right? A technology that's slow, cumbersome, expensive, and not and maybe easy enough to use is actually extremely susceptible to different types of the hijacking that we mentioned. And all Roger wanted to do was to keep the original intention of Bitcoin prominent so that it could scale. And you probably remember at the time, and Cherry, you probably remember, and hopefully the audience remembers if you were, in paying attention to crypto at the time, there was a lot of people who were talking about the importance of mass adoption. So this could be cash used at scale. And one of the claims shortly after the fallout of all this that Roger made, which I think is largely true, is that this put behind it set the cryptocurrency industry behind potentially decades, right? Because Bitcoin fragmented, the community fragmented, and there was no there. And by the way, this is to me, we and Chair hinted at this. We don't have to get into all the put on our tinfoil hat and get into all the conspiracies, but this is a hallmark of an op, right? By probably a 3-letter alphabet soup organization in the context of the US. This isn't outside of the realm of their playbook for sure. And there is some evidence to back this up. Roger talks about it. I think the book is behind me, Hijacking Bitcoin, right here. By the way, this has been the whole concept of the discussion. So highly recommend checking out Roger's book. The whole, I think, and this is what I'm going to end on saying, this is really, it's a lesson. It's a lesson that we have to make. This goes back to the conversation Chair and I had earlier. Remember, we have to keep our communities as principled as possible. We have to have the human component very strongly engaged, developing a culture that sustains the original intention so that the intentions can't get drastically altered, i.e., hijacked and taken into a different direction, because that's largely what happened to Bitcoin. But I think the lessons have been learned, even if they're not fully like written down as a strategy necessarily on paper. A lot of these communities that have a deep privacy ethos and cypherpunk ethos are starting to really focus on the human component. They're maintaining a higher degree of perception and awareness with what could happen because it has happened in the past, right? And this is the thing. I think a lot of people went into cryptocurrency early on, especially if it was the more ideological people, that this is going to be impervious and unstoppable. There was a little bit of what we can say wishful thinking or grandiose thinking, and it ends up that you still have you like, not all areas are protected as easily as, say, the base layer, right? Because still to this day, even Bitcoin on the base, you can't like shut it down. So you have to, if you're an attacker, if you're a nefarious actor, you have to go at it at the edges. Anyway,
If you're an attacker, you have to do it exactly how the block size wars went down.
100%.
That's the only way that you can disrupt something as rigid as if rigid is the right, as robust as the network was. Then you have to start early, and it's a long thing, and you have to identify the correct personalities and manipulate things into the whole thing. We can get it. I can't wait to get deeper into it on the next episode of the Crypto Bitcoin Ethereum Private Decentralized Infrastructure Show with Sterlin and me. Chair, I'm here to prop you up. That's Sterlin right over there. Same time, same place next week. We're going to do this every Tuesday for the foreseeable future going forward. I do encourage you to check out logos.co. That is the burgeoning blockchain network and peer-to-peer technology stack, privacy at the default layer that Sterlin and I both contribute towards in various ways. And we'll certainly be getting deeper into it in the future. What you're looking at, what you've been looking at, is the Logos Global Uptime Leaderboard, which is a peek into the health of the network. That blockchain testnet is in version 0.1.2. And by the way, for the handful of you that have stuck around, I see you. Thank you. You can use the chat if you have any questions for us as we start wrapping things up. And if you're watching later, your comments, questions, feedback, strong disagreements, and otherwise, we will field in future episodes. So please, if you're not following, subscribed, with notifications on wherever you might be watching, which is a bunch of places. And by the way, if you are watching on Sterlin's channel, the title is title, but rest assured, that's my fault, number one. Number two, the Crypto Bitcoin Ethereum Private Decentralized Infrastructure Show is the title, and that will be corrected. Again, my apologies.
Yeah, by the way, sorry to interrupt your flow. I actually noticed that like a third of the way through, and I changed it, but I don't even think it's updated fully. And the one on my Facebook, I had to change manually, so I just named it whatever came to mind quickly while we were chatting.
It's all coming together here, folks. If you're here now, you're here for the very beginning, and lucky you, as this is the first iteration of first episode. Even should we number these? Maybe we should number these. But this is number one, literally, or zero if you like index zero, and who doesn't? It's a crypto blockchain private Bitcoin Ethereum infrastructure show after all, isn't it? So this is show number 0. And we will be right back here with you. What you're looking at is the Logos Global Uptime Leaderboard for the blockchain, which is in testnet version 1.0.1.2. France is in the lead, and this is measuring node runners, or at least the IPs that they're broadcasting. They might be using VPNs, so like in reality, this is all. In reality, the most important thing that you can derive is over the last 7 days, there have been 959 peers seen, and over the last 30 days, there have been 2,396 peers seen, and we're looking at their average uptime. So how does the rank work? It's the number of nodes and the uptime of those nodes. So even though Finland has, I think total hours is actually the ultimate statistic. So it's Finland, or at least people basing their IPs out of Finland, there have been 12 nodes with slightly or even markedly better uptime average. Germany's total hours number of nodes outweighs that, so on and so forth. If you're interested, and I think you are if you're still watching, the data source, all of the entire data source pipeline, sort of how this leaderboard is generated, you can find if you click on data source, and the script itself. Everything on Logos is open source. This leaderboard is open source. It's derived directly from the logs of nodes. So that is how these things are compiled. And look at all the way down there in 5th place is the United States, not performing so well. Americans, what are we doing out there? This is at leaderboard.logos.live, but you can check out, and you should check out, logos.co, and do install Logos Basecamp. That is the native application and the way to navigate through all of the Logos ecosystem in any module that exists, and is a native application on your machine. It does not run through the browser. That is the most important thing. And the second biggest takeaway, the first biggest takeaway, is the most important thing that you can do as someone who supports the vision of Logos, the technology, what it represents, and what it can possibly unlock. The most important thing you can do is run a node, and docs.logos.co is where you should go. That's where you'll find the instructions to run a node. Right now, the way to do it is via the command line. Very, very soon, I'm talking like this week, you will also be able to run a node via Logos Basecamp. But I encourage you, especially if this is interesting to you right now as you're watching this, whenever it is, by the way, to run it from the command line, because it is, if it's something that you're comfortable with, because that's the way to do it, right? Like it is the most pure way, directly running on your metal, your machine, wherever you want to do it. And that's the headless way. But do go check it out, logos.co, and you can find all of the things, the circles that I mentioned earlier as well, in Los Angeles circle tonight. So logos.co is where you should go. Sterlin, I think we did it, and I had a ton of fun. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it was a blast. I really enjoyed it. These conversations too are just critical, especially for new people coming into the space who are trying to figure things out. Right? You and I have been, lucky enough to have been at the grindstone of crypto for a good while. So hopefully this does act as an educational portal and a bit of a cautionary tale at the same time.
Oh, yes. I've taken almost every misstep you can, folks, and I'll gladly tell you about all of it. So hopefully you won't do the same. No, I say tongue in cheek a lot. I'm here to prop you up, but it's real. I take the most. I get the most. There's so much of what I've been able to accomplish in life, if you can call it that, is directly because people helped me, and they didn't have to. And so I'm forever indebted and forever trying to pay it forward. So for this show to be a vehicle for that, to help people. That's why, ask your questions in the chat, in the comments, in replies on Twitter, whatever, in the forum, wherever you're comfortable with. And we'll do our best to field it and field them, because that's supporting people and that want to get involved is something I've always wanted to do. Follow Sterlin at Sterlin Lujan, as you can see so beautifully scrolling across the bottom of your screen from right to left, at Sterlin Lujan. I would say virtually everywhere, certainly on X. I am at Very Comfy, VRYCMFY, everywhere, basically. I do have my Chairs Table stream every Friday, where I go for a very long time. So do subscribe and turn noties on, and I'll see you this Friday. And I'm sure Sterlin will be coming through the table as well. Sterlin does a regular space every Saturday, I believe, Sterlin?
Correct. I do the parallel mind, which is primarily a philosophical outlook on how our world is changing and where it's going and what it's evolving toward. That's the primary thrust, and how the parallel society ecosystem, blockchain ecosystem, and technology, generally speaking, fits into it. Yeah, thank you so much. That happens Saturday, usually at 2 p.m. Central Time.
Follow Sterlin to catch those, and we'll see you right here next week, same time, and we'll do it again for the crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, private decentralized infrastructure show.